So much of today's narrative about humanity and life on Earth is nihilistic. So Lee Harris and I decided to produce a book on the future of humanity titled The Future Human. This was a channeled work with the Z's, and to say there were surprises would be an understatement. The good news right off the bat is that we humans will still be here on Earth, and we will be better and better to one another as time goes on. Spoiler alert, right?
Yes.
Welcome back, Lee.
Hi.
We were just talking. 2014, we did our first interview here.
Yep.
This is our 8th or 9th one.
Yeah, and it's been 9 years.
And it's wonderful going back, and if anybody chose to go back and look at the conversations and the evolution of the conversations with the Z's and what I was interested in, what they were interested in, what they were willing to reveal and such, and it just keeps getting more, I think, more profound and kind of poignant as time goes on, because we're getting to an interesting point in history.
Exactly, and I think when we did the Future Human recordings, of course, you being you and having your breadth of knowledge and your own intuition, where you steer them is so interesting. And I think I shared this with you on our last conversation here. Something changed around 2019, 2020, and I think in tandem with how much more serious world events became in 2020, I noticed a shift in how much they would speak about certain topics, because I think they're always trying to make sure that they contribute not to the fear on the planet, but to the evolution on the planet. So there's always that fine line, but I have noticed they have been far more explicit about some of the what people refer to as darker agendas or control agendas over the last 3-4 years, and their reasoning is because it's time and because that's there and it's more evident. And so actually we have to have some level of awareness of that in order to create something different.
Yeah, because prior to that, that was kind of, they just kept that in behind the veil, so to speak.
Yes.
And so now they're being much more bold, they're very clear. Yes, there's an agenda. Yes, you are at the tail end of it. And so let's talk about that. And they've been wonderful. I loved that they were so direct during the recording of the book, which of course it's an audiobook and a written book. So what I want to do is one of the areas that we talked about in the book, and it's interesting because some of it you don't remember, well, most of it you don't remember because you're not there. No. The Z's are there.
And we haven't finished editing yet, so when I go to edit, I will see all the material, but I don't remember a lot of it.
Yes, I remember a little more than you do because we're both in a somewhat altered state. Yes. And there were certain areas and what's going on in the world right now, as you mentioned, 2020. Prior to 2020 in America, we had a huge split and divide that became emotionally charged around our presidential election. Then we go right into 2019, 2020 through early 22, and the world events of the pandemic. And now here we are, and we're seeing over the last months play out very, very dire events in the Middle East. And so one of the things I wanted to get into a little bit, and I'll talk to the Z's about it in a bit, is the notion of free will, because what's happening right now is all of these books, articles, it feels to me like a dark agenda coming out about the notion, people that are supposed scientists saying there is no free will.
It's interesting because you brought that information to me several months ago. I hadn't seen those articles, but where it mapped with what I've heard the Z's talking about the last few years is they've said there is essentially a frequency war or an energetic battle taking place on the planet that's been going on for, in a bigger way, the last 6-7 years, or in a more obvious way. And it's really all about the soul, because that's what makes the human unique. We have a certain emotional energy field, and we have the soul in the human body. And so what we're seeing now from certain camps is this movement to essentially remove the soul from humanity, essentially turn humans into robots or machines. And I don't mean literally, but if you look at how our world has started to become less organic, less about the environment, even our way of engaging has started to be moved more through technology and less, in fact, there have been direct blocking of us being together as people.
Right.
So we're losing a part of that organic and energetic wisdom that we share. And so it's interesting when you told me about those articles that were talking about free will doesn't even exist. Well, that's a direct contradiction to what the Z's have been talking about. And they say that the power of the soul and the power of our consciousness is what gives us an opportunity as humanity to shift not just the consciousness of humanity, but the consciousness of what is taking place on this planet, how we operate on this planet, and cleaning up so many of the areas that we've all been either unconscious of or we have been trained to be unconscious of. So it's a super intense time.
Very intense time, and you're
complex.
Right. Complex, and what you brought up a moment ago is really important. By having a global pandemic, whatever a person's belief on that is, one thing is certain: it separated people from one another.
Yeah.
And it made us very dependent on technology for about a year's period of time, and for the really intense part of it. And people start getting into habits. This is very addictive. Technology is very addictive. And so now you have people pulling away from one another and becoming increasingly dependent on this technology, which has its own messaging constantly via algorithms that appeal to us and make us feel good. So you're only hearing the reinforcement of what you already like in your own position. No surprise, we became more and more and more emotionally and mentally polarized from one another when you're being fed just what you want to hear and never have to consider an opposing or even a neutral point of view.
It's interesting. I had a kind of experiment with this. It was earlier this year, and I was alone for about 5 days. I was traveling, I was in a hotel, and I had some things to do, but mostly I was alone. And so technology became the way I was communicating a lot of the time. And I really noticed a huge shift when I started being out in the world with people a few days later versus what my energy field, my consciousness, and my mind was doing in those 3 or 4 days where I was going between only technological communication and also taking information in technologically. And it was so marked to me.
Yes.
And I know so many people, especially spiritual people or sensitives or light workers, who have isolated themselves. And for years, the Z's have been saying, don't isolate unless you are recovering or repairing from something.
Right.
You have to be very careful about how long you isolate for. And that was a really visceral experience for me of, oh, wow, this is how my body, my consciousness, my mind responds to having a relationship and relationships through a computer screen, through a phone, versus being with people. And I think, like many, I crave this now.
Yes.
There's a certain level that technology has given us, but we have to be the guardians of, are we still coming together with people? And I also think there is a part of it that's more complicated. Because when you're in front of another human being, unless you have a really harmonic relationship with that human being, things don't always go your way, or you hit wounds, or you hit... But if you go to the computer and the algorithms have selected everything you like and agree with, you have a falsely harmonious existence with a computer that's a little bit like eating food that has no calorific or nutritional value.
Well put. That is so true. You don't have to develop those parts of yourself that contend with any kind of challenge, really, emotional or mental, because you're being spoon-fed, like we talked about. And the other thing is you're not communicating with all the subtle energies of a person's field. All these subtle bodies we have, our multidimensional minds that we have, that's all wiped out and flattened when it's done just through technology. Even if you're watching a wonderful podcast, it's very different when you're sitting in the room, like someone watching this even. It's very different if someone's sitting right here and feeling the energy coming off of us. You know, it's fabulous in that these platforms exist. And when I talk to these, they're going to talk a little bit about the wonder of what AI can do, it can do, but the way it's going is big cautionary tales here.
Well, and I should also say that the Z's have multiple times spoken about the positives of technology and the internet, and they said, like anything, it has its downsides and there are things you have to be aware of, but they talk about how the arrival of the internet has created a new level of psychic field among all of us, and it has connected us all in ways.
Yes.
Of course, now we're at a period where, yet again, there are attempts to control or direct the internet. There are certain countries where that's already happening.
Oh, yes.
So it's an interesting topic. It's like everything, there is no one perspective, and I think the biggest risk for all of us right now, we've just seen it with the events in the Middle East, is thinking there is one truth
Right.
and taking your side about that truth and then trying to annihilate someone who has an opposing truth. Essentially, what we have done is we have become the war energy, the very war energy that the Z's say we are trying to purge out of our
That is
system.
true. We have. I mean, it would be my greatest dream to be able to have a conversation between the highest consciousness beings, whatever the issue is of conflict, the highest consciousness beings on both sides, and look at how we could start looking at these issues in a completely new way, in a mature way, in a way laced with historical perspective. But you're not going to get that anywhere on the media, right, left, or even alternative. It just doesn't exist.
It's true. And, you know, one of the things with the whole cancel culture movement that's very tricky, sure, there are some people who have lost their positions of power, authority, or notoriety for very good reason because of things that they have done. But I think what's so tricky about it is the way that the media portrays it is very base and very low vibration.
Yes.
Shouldn't we as a society be looking to, in many of those cases, say, well, what do we do to transform the situation for the person who is now being blamed, the people who suffered? How do we bring those together? Or if not together, how do we give them the right healing? And how do we as a society learn and look at this?
That would be my dream.
The media doesn't really... As we know, you know, there are different agendas at work. And so keeping us in a reactive, base, warlike frequency actually feeds those other agendas that are playing out on a global scale. So it's a tricky time.
It is, because it would require very deep honesty. And we've already been conditioned away from any kind of nuance. Oh, see, look what they said. They just admitted it. Calm down, you know?
Yes.
And so, like I said, that would be my dream, is to mediate those conversations. Absolutely.
Heart. And to me, when heart is present, so can a higher mind of heart be present. But if the heart isn't allowed to be present, if compassion, if an open heart, if softness and vulnerability aren't allowed into the conversation, and we're just supposed to respond from a very base level and fight and blame, then we don't get anywhere. So it's an interesting, it's almost like we have to move up the chakras now in terms of what the mainstream consciousness is. And I know there are many people doing that in their own way, doing it for the planet, meditating, but it feels like we're at this moment where it's all beginning to hit the mainstream, and the question is, how many people will jump on board with a newer way of doing things versus get dragged down through fear vibration into the old way, recycling?
That's what they're betting on.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay, so before we get in, let's go ahead and go to the Z's in a second here, and we're going to get into all of this and the notion of free will, the lack of, the perception that's being proposed that we don't have free will, and how that prepares us for an AI agenda and all of that. I'm going to talk to the Z's about all of it. We have there's so much we talked about in the book about AI, but we're going to I'm going to do follow-up questions that I didn't get to ask in the book.
Great.
Okay?
Good. A pleasure to be with you. We are aware that we are speaking to you from the point of time that is a major change year on the planet. You will not only see evidence of this change taking place in more dramatic ways than you have perhaps seen in even recent years, but more than that, this is the year where the heart of the change is born. So even that which you cannot see in the externalized world is already being born in this year of 2024, which is the time of this transmission. So what many of you will be experiencing as you navigate this, and will have been going through this, some of you, for the last year or two, is enormous personal transformation. Shedding of your own existing identity that ran along the track of who you were ancestrally as a humanity. Many of you are waking up in more powerful ways than you even thought possible. Even those of you who have been what you might call a seeker or a student for 40, 50, 60 years, you are having experiences in consciousness that are far beyond anything you ever thought might be possible in your lifetime. Some of you are very close to the veil, almost like a near-death experience that is happening while you are still alive, in terms of how much you can tap into not only your own higher frequencies, but your oversoul, and the path of your soul journey, not just here on Earth, but galactically. For galactic consciousness is what is now beginning to merge with the Earth in this year of 2024. So, we are aware you have many questions for us, but we will just say this. Be very mindful of how there will be those who want to co-opt that galactic energy that many of you will be feeling coming in, and they will want to present it to you in a certain way that they have organized, a little like the wolf in sheep's clothing. You will be told, this is galactic, but the truth is, you are galactic. There will be others who will try and present galactic energy to you as if it is something that is other. They may even try to get you afraid of it. And that will not just play out in 2024, that will run through 2027. However, as we have always said, from 2025 onwards, evidence of increasing new energy, vibration, and more importantly, new technology developments on Earth that will be in opposition with what you would call the old energy ways on Earth are going to start to be even more visible, more seen. So, to recap, many of you feel quite disoriented, so you should. It's a disorienting time on the planet structurally, where the energy is concerned. But many of you are just about to emerge into, personally, greater lives than you have ever known is possible. And the greatest challenge for many of you will be to be able to allow that through you while also and equally holding deep compassion and awareness for the ups and downs that are going on around you for so many of your loved ones and indeed the planet as a whole. Those of you who embrace the next level of yourselves and your personal lives will actually start to direct your attention, your energy, and your frequency out into the world in ways that will help lift the vibration of the whole. So it's a complex time for many of you, but so many of you were trained for this in Atlantean times. This time, you are playing it out in a slightly more human way, but the positives of that technology is beginning to show in, through, and for many of you.
Thank you for that. What a wonderful start to the conversation. One of the things, and welcome, it's good to have you back in the studio.
Good, a pleasure to be with you again.
So what I wanted to talk about is something we touched on but didn't get to in our conversation around the future human. And it's because it's coming up, I think, as an agenda right now. And that is the notion of, quote, scientists, unquote, telling us that we actually have no free will. They have analyzed it. They've looked at it right down to a level of our neurons. And they say, nope, everything has been predestined and pre-programmed. So with that in mind, it would be an hour-long discussion for you to explain the nuances of all of it. But let's just take some recent events, and we could even go further back. So the things playing out in the Middle East where people are at each other's throats and definitely blaming one another and taking sides around the planet. Is this something, as a nuance of free will, that was already known that was going to occur, that it was inevitable, like a lot of world events, if you looked at it from, say, an astrological or numerological point of view? Can you explain a little bit of the nuance around what is destined and what is our free will within it? And we'll use the Middle East as an example.
Good. We will give our perspective, and as ever, there are multiple perspectives and ways to see everything. So depending on your alignment with our perspective, you will either agree with or reject what it is we are about to share. But first things first, we need to talk about this notion of scientists and how it is a myth. So, if you take 10 different doctors and you go to them for a treatment for something you are sick with, you will get 10 varying opinions. And you will not like all of the opinions, and you will not want to work with all 10 of those doctors. You will choose your alignment. You will choose who fits your belief system, who felt the best energy to you, and what feels true to you. There is a weapon that is brought against all of you, this notion of scientists, as if they are fact. That is a complete myth. Firstly, you don't know how well educated the scientist is. Secondly, you don't know what the belief system of the scientist is. And there are scientists who have been corrupted. Corruption is in every single area of life. And what we mean by corruption is is somebody telling you something that they have either been paid or threatened to tell you so that it serves an agenda, but they are being used as the front person to make you believe a thing that isn't necessarily going to ultimately be good for you. So here we want to question this notion of scientists have said. A scientist said something. Ask yourself, why did they say it? What led them to say it? Is it truly their belief system, or have they been brought in to say something? So first of all, discernment, discernment, discernment. The biggest problem that is happening on your planet, and this is why so many of you feel so off, and we don't even mean those of you who are awake to this, we mean the planet as a whole. So many of you are being forced to try and believe a belief. There is no such thing as a belief. There is no unifying belief on the planet. Your world is a multidimensional hall of mirrors. And if you don't understand that, you are going to bang your head on every battle point that one person's opinion throws your way. All opinions need to be held lightly. Why? You transform. An 8-year-old thinks it's the worst day in their life because they aren't allowed to get the toy they want. That same human, when they are 80, has a very different perspective on what a worst day in their life is. Beliefs and perspectives change. Your own will change, and those around you must be vetted. So this is a time where you have to pay attention to authoritative opinions being used against you. So, fair enough. Some people believe there is no such thing as free will, and that may be their actual truth. It doesn't mean it is yours. There is no provable fact on Earth, in fact. Yes, there are certain measurements that everyone will agree to, but when it comes to consciousness and the soul, it is far more of a mystery than any human mind or brain could ever wrap itself around. Even this channeling that is coming through Lee, while we have a fairly pure access to his body, consciousness and mind to do this, still there is a filtration system, still there is an influence. And so that is why for some, this channeled information, messages will resonate, and for others it will not. And that is how it should be. None of you should be forced into believing one thing or another. You are a multidimensional planet for a reason. So pay attention when your beliefs are being shut down. When a certain group is being subjugated, minimized, you see how that plays out all across the planet. And guess what it's good for? When you have certain groups, roles, genders, identities on the planet that get marginalized, abused, oppressed, it serves to create the fear that it might happen to you. So that is why ultimately all humans who come from oneness need to return to oneness, this essential idea that you are actually all equal. No one is better than another person, but society may have decided that at certain moments in history, this person is of superior value for one reason or another. Now we come to your question about the Middle East. Yes, it is destined that war was going to rise at this time. And you are speaking about a very historic war. We will say the flames have been fanned from so many different countries, even though the story you will be told is that this is about two countries having an ancient fight that has blown up again. Yet the truth is, and this is something that all of you are learning, all of your governments, not every single one, they have a very important interest in war. And we don't mean that means that every human who works in government has an interest in war, for there are more people working inside government who are not necessarily running the same agendas that a small group are. But what you must understand is war is all about power. And in the same way that an individual will work hard when they are unconscious to protect their own power, to protect their own food source, to protect their own needs, so too will a country and its leadership while you are still in such a polarized global culture where there is this them and us mentality. So was the war destined? We will say two things. You were destined to be experiencing the ripples of war, particularly in the year of 2024. This was something that was going to rise to the surface again as a cycle. because the energy template of war was sown into the earth a very long time ago, and many of you have been here trying to be peacekeepers and those who are here to harmonize, to ripple something different onto the planet. But these seeds run deep, and there are many agendas that have decided to fan the flames in the Middle East because it is better it blows up there than in another country. But there were 3 or 4 potentials where this war could have risen from.
Why do you say better it blew up there than elsewhere?
Because it serves the agendas of certain other countries who would rather not get directly involved themselves.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. And when we spoke during the recording of Future Human, you did mention that we were going to be entering a time, and it's going to be, and maybe you can share with us a bit of that timeline if you can, where war will become truly obsolete on this planet.
Yes, that is what you are actually working towards, and it is why there is a great deal of galactic energy that surrounds the Earth now. As we have always said, there are those of you who believe that other life forms from other places, other dimensions, are only benevolent, and there are those of you who believe the opposite, and we would say neither is actually true. Just as you see on Earth, there are all kinds of warring factions that have played out galactically. That is where war was seeded from. War is not actually a human development. It is seeded on this planet. So what you are seeing is the horror of most of you on Earth and the powerlessness that you feel around these acts of war and these atrocities to your fellow brothers, sisters, because you feel powerless to do anything about it. And the truth is, on a practical, physical level, you have been made powerless. You are not powerless energetically and you are not powerless vibrationally. But this moment in time is yet another example for humans, if they choose to see it, just like they have been seeing in the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years on Earth, how removed you are from governance as a people. How actually the game of governance and people for a very long time was able to be a little more invisible in how uninclusive it is of the needs, desires, and wants of the people. And right now you are very evidently seeing how distorted and corrupt much of your governmental influence has become. Again, we want to qualify here, because as we say these things, some of you get very angry and you want to take down all the governments and you start focusing on all the people who work in government. And we would say, mistake. It's not about most of the people who are working in government, and there are many in there who are doing their best to try and improve things. It is the heart of the system itself. It is the way that the system has become structured, and it is also certain corporate interests that have overlapped. So it is a difficult time because many humans will say, well, what can we actually do? And we will say, well, there are many of you who've been put on this planet to dismantle this, and you know exactly who you are, and you've been doing it for a very long time. You are more than just whistleblowers. There are people who are positioned right now who are doing very diligent work to dismantle from the inside. But then, for most of the rest of you, which is most who listen to this, there are some of you who are those that we spoke of a moment ago listening to this. For most of the rest of you, the vibration of who you are becoming, the level of consciousness of who you are becoming as humans, yes, even on such a distorted planet when it comes to harmony, even on a planet where there are horrors taking place every single day, there is so much light and consciousness that humans are now able to access that it is enough of you giving voice, body, and energy to those frequencies that start to naturally oppose what we will call the Dark Ages warlike mentality that many have been running the show with for thousands and thousands of years, that is now in its last-ditch attempt to try and grasp full control of the planet. And as we have said many times, that simply is not possible. However hard they may try, and whatever collateral damage may happen along the way in their attempts, you are at the period of history where an energetic revolution begins.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful.
We want to add something. It is very difficult for us to speak about this to you without many of you going into the very fear of what it is we are speaking about. We don't want to in any way ask you to judge yourself for that. We want you to notice it. We want you to notice that your body slightly tightens up when we speak about these things. That is history. That is the history of the soul lifetimes where you have been through so many cycles on this planet and others around war. Please pay attention to your own nervous system and your own bodily reaction, because the way to create a new template on earth is to become mindful of the part of you that contracts when you hear, see, or feel information along those lines, and to work with the part of you that contracts, release those feelings, let them through you, and then return to the light, return to consciousness, return to recognizing, even though you do not like that, even though you wish it were different on the planet, you are here to represent and emit and become something other. You will not be it all the time. You will all have your light and dark days. That is life. But there are many of you now who are working to shed that dark war template reaction from inside you. And that is important work, because then you will not continue repeating the same pattern in the years to come. So noticing how you react to the darker frequencies is key for so many of you in becoming a lighter, brighter, higher frequency more of the time.
Yes, thank you. So you were talking a moment ago about these scientists, which I now just call them pseudoscientists, the ones who perpetuate this kind of information, because theirs is just a science of belief or agenda. This is no longer linked to anything that's provable, so to speak. And it does not allow for soul at all.
Science cannot measure the soul.
It cannot.
Can provide a few pointers,
right,
but it simply cannot measure the soul, because there is no science required to measure the soul. The soul has its own cosmic science. You have to open to the soul to understand the soul. Many of these scientists who are studying the soul are trying to disprove something that they have never experienced. So how on earth, if they cannot get inside the very thing they are trying to measure, how can they, and why would they, try and spend their life disproving it? A far better use of their time would be to engage in trying to embrace and become it and see for themselves.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's not a surprise that most of the people that do this particular kind of science or pseudoscience are completely atheistic, in the sense that we're neurochemicals and we're cells and meat. And so for everyone watching this, they know that doesn't work. But the thing is, a large percentage of the population can still be swayed by this pseudoscience, as it's getting and has been getting so much press lately, this notion of lack of free will. It's coming into some of our entertainment and programming as well. And so part of this also, the same group of people have convinced us that we're naturally warring by nature, that humans are naturally competitive and violent and warring by nature. So let's talk about, if you can, who seeded that on Earth? What group or what beings seeded the notion of war, and then these kinds of puppeteering agendas that are playing out right now? And if it's not important for us to know exactly what an identity is, the nature of the group and what they're trying to achieve out of this, and when they're going to stop.
Well, firstly, we will say to you that anyone whose agenda is to try and disprove something else that someone believes, they are in a war mentality. Why spend your life trying to disprove something that someone else can tell you they experience? So many of them are the reincarnated witch hunters, other forms of role on the earth where they were brought in to essentially oppose or war against spirit. So that is the first thing. Secondly, the part about how was war seeded, who was war seeded by. The Earth, a long time ago, was very underpopulated compared to what you see now. So there were less beings on the Earth, and the Earth was not, shall we say, dimensionally organized the way it is now. Many of you have helped to create, through your lifetimes, not you particularly who are incarnate right now, although some of you would have been incarnate in other lifetimes going back thousands of years, you have helped to create what the Earth is. So what we mean by this is, many of you have been born onto the Earth in this lifetime and told, this is what Earth is, this is what this country is, this is what the ocean is, this is what the land is. But what we can tell you is that every few hundred years the Earth has changed. And the way that people perceive, experience, and engage with the Earth
is very different in each of those iterations. But what happens is your history starts to get rewritten so that you can make people believe and understand certain things. It's why people get up in arms about other dimensions of reality. There are those who firmly believe and have experiences about what's going on inner Earth. And there are those who, when they hear about different dimensions of reality and places where people are living in inner Earth, they think these people are insane. And yet the truth is, there are different ways of experiencing the Earth. We said earlier, it's a hall of mirrors, and we meant it. How you see the Earth dimensionally affects what you actually experience. So, the war was implanted here because a long time ago, Earth was seen as a planet that was going to be one of great evolution. There was an idea that you could create what we will call what you might call a superhuman, but a being that in your physical terms would be at least 12 foot tall or more, and would be a light being with a human body, but an elongated human body to what you know now. That was the idea of a certain race who wanted to seed that here on Earth. And at that time, there was a war for this planet that was going on in a way that was, shall we say, energetic in nature. It was not a physicalized war. It was a very advanced war. And so during that period of time, what we refer to as a clamp was placed on Earth and the possibility of the development of Earth. The idea was that the human could evolve very fast into this, what we will call superhuman being. But that clamp stopped this from being allowed. And the way that the clamp works is to keep the human being in all of what you might call the lower chakra limitations, to not allow them to open up the higher chakras in a way that then permeates through the energy field. So, for example, if someone opens their third eye, meaning they start having psychic and visionary experiences, if they are capable of going with that opening, it will start to flood every other part of their being. It will open their heart. It will open their other chakras. It will start to illuminate their being. But because you have all been trained in such compartmentalized, logical and, if you like, boxed ways as to how you are as human beings, often you stop at the third eye. You open your intuition, your psychic development, but you don't know how to take it into the body. And that's no one's fault other than the training on Earth and the clamp that we speak about. So there was a time when Earth was going to be, shall we say, used by a certain race, and that war did not come to fruition. But the seeds of war that were planted here, and that what we will call takeover that was never able to happen, it left the seeds of war that other races could co-opt. And two of them did, and they are still, in many ways, influencing Earth and having their own war that is completely separate to what is going on in humanity. And so as we give you all of this information, what's tricky maybe for you to grasp is this sounds ludicrous, or it doesn't sound true, or it sounds more complicated. Well, yes, because you have been so far removed from this history that it doesn't always make sense to your mind. But here is the bigger point. Many of you are now remembering, and not the facts that we are speaking about here. And again, those are facts that only certain people will believe or align with, because everything is a hall of mirrors and a perspective game. But there are many of you who are beginning to realize your galactic origins. It's why for periods of time, many of you were so interested in off-world events. It's not that you were interested in off-world events. It's that you were remembering that you also are an off-worlder in another time and in another dimension. So you are slowly cycling through this evolutionary dance where you get to not only come back to the origin of when and how and why war was seeded on this planet, but you also start to create an energy field in yourself as humans that will in fact repel and purge that war template that was sown on Earth. We say it will take quite a while to get there, but this war in the Middle East that you focus for this conversation is a big part of humanity's shift in awareness and desire and tolerance around war.
Thank you. And so taking it from the macro view that you just gave us, so those who have co-opted this agenda for clamping and are perhaps even influencing us greatly through technology, AI, algorithms, and so forth at this time, seems like it's almost the last playing field to co-opt the mind, co-opt the sense that we have sovereignty, free will, and connection to one another. How are those forces feeling right now with the awakening of people occurring on the planet?
More nervous than you would believe, but their nervousness does not show up emotionally, for they are not emotional the way humans are. There is a race for some of them to preserve their own life and their own, what you would call, line, as well as livelihoods. And that race is very primal inside them. That desire to preserve is a very primal instinct. Many of them have, we will say, through the ages, lost more of their, what we would call, desired humanity. For part of the attraction to being on Earth was there were energies seeded here that would create this, we will say, emotional superhuman. We don't mean emotional as in lots of crying and feeling. We mean emotional on a sensory level. One of the reasons that you are a very emotional set of creatures is because your sensory and intuitive nature is what we will call blocked. So everything goes into big, deep emotions that run through the central core of your body. That is not what you are designed to be. That level of what some of you will jokingly or sometimes judgingly call human drama is in fact the human impulse system that isn't able to become the sensory intuitive, fully fledged being that the superhuman you is designed to become. So where you get arrested emotionally is part of the what you might call the ups and downs of life, but many were attracted to this. So this specific race that we are speaking of, in fact, there are two who are in competition, and of course there are other interests too, because Earth is a primary planet right now. Earth is a planet that still holds a great deal of consciousness and enlightenment potential. And unlike those of you who are humans who want to see that come to fruition, that is an energy generator. And so they are feeding off that energy. They want to siphon the energy that is generated, much like you would speak of solar power or other sources of new energy. There is an energy that those beings want to feed off in the rise of consciousness. But in order to successfully feed off it, they have to first trap and contain it. They can't feed off it if it becomes more powerful than their level, which is the decade that you are now in.
So the original template to create this superhuman, one of the things we talked about quite a bit in the book, we don't have time to talk about now, is that our way of using mind is moving into the heart. This is against all those agendas that are being perpetuated against humanity and the AI influence on humanity. So people can read the book or listen to the book for that. But are we ultimately going to end up in some form of this, what you call superhuman?
In your lifetime, it is going to depend on the individual. There are many of you who will become that and already are in many ways. But you will not in your lifetimes see the entire population become that. We should clarify. The two most important energies for you right now are heart and intuition. We don't necessarily mean intuition being able to predict. We mean intuition, your sense, your ability to discern, your ability to feel truth, rather than let your mind tell you what the truth is because someone else has told you it. You spoke earlier about people who are easily swayed. There are two reasons people are easily swayed by someone else's mind, because they don't know their own mind, because they haven't been able to experience the sovereignty to discover who they are, what they are, why they're here, or they are swayed because it completely fits what feels most comfortable to them. So they are being backed up by this person's opinion. But to your point and your question here, the heart and the intuition are the two most important areas of development in the coming years and decades for you as a humanity. It is why you are being steered away from so many of those energies in many different ways. It is why you also have a certain level of organization around your heart. You see, the way to keep people away from the greater level or power of something is to tell people what it is, tell them how they can experience it, and then limit its use. So there is a great celebration of kindness. We will give you an example here. To go back to the war agenda and how it moves through your competitive shows, we'll talk about your television shows that so many of you are focused on. There are these contests that take place, whether it is dancing, whether it is singing. And many of you are focused on the emotional side of those shows, but there are still winners and losers. War is sewn into it. So you see, you are given that taste of what it is you crave, which is connection, emotion, heart. But you are also fed a winner and loser competitive side. So it is always limited. So the heart and intuition that are coming online for so many of you right now is so important, because those are the areas that cannot actually be touched. But you can stop somebody from opening to those if you sow enough fear and control into them and their life.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much for sharing that at the end. And believe it or not, we've barely started. We're out of time. I want to thank you so much for adding even more to the hours and hours of conversation we had recently that created the future human.
There is no need for thanks. It is our pleasure. Thank you for your facilitation, and to all who are tuning in. We know it is a precarious time on earth, and it can be heavy on your hearts. But understand, all of you came here for a mission of light, consciousness, love. And some days you will be out of touch with that, and you will only be in touch with your humanity. There is nothing wrong with being in touch with your humanity. It is the way through which many of you are experiencing your enlightenment. But remember, if your vibration drops, if a person or a piece of information makes your vibration drop, pay attention and reset. That is how you keep yourself clean, clear, and powerful in these times.
Thank you.
In peace and in love. Ha.
Welcome back. Goodbye.
Thank you. Hi.
We're out of time.
It seemed so quick.
Oh my God, it felt like 5 minutes. It just flew. A lot of good information from the Z's as always. And there were some wonderful kind of knock-ons from the conversation we had in the book as well. So I think people will have a chance to kind of see what the genesis of some of those questions were. Beautiful information. Great. Very powerful.
Great. Thank you, my
Lee,
friend.
thank you so much for lending yourself to us once again. So this is what, 8 or 9? We'll see you, and we'll see you on show 10 with another book.
Absolutely.
Thank you, my dear. The book's title is The Future Human, and we'll both be delighted to hear your thoughts after either reading or listening to the book. There's so much to engage with there and chew on in its pages. Until next time, thank you for joining us here on Open Minds.